Hi guys! In this video, we will be understanding the relationships and connections of changing places and finishing off with an exam-style question.
So we're going to start off this video giving a background to the relationships and connections between places. And the first thing I want to say is that places change over time. Places never stay the same, whether that's to do with their characteristics, their dynamic, the people that live there. Places and their characteristics change. And this is because they are dynamic, and they should also be understood as the coming together of the people, the ideas, wealth, and the information contained within them, rather than places just being described as a simple location. There are so many more factors that relate to place rather than just location, which give place its identity. So, for example, if we considered the economic rise and fall of British industrial cities such as Liverpool in the 19th and 20th century, and the impacts this has had on their population and the environment. So, alongside this, for example, British seaside resorts have also undergone significant change in the last 50 years as they've had to adapt to the number of more people who travel abroad for their holidays rather than staying on holiday within the UK. So these factors, such as just economic factors on this part through these examples, tend to have the biggest factors or the biggest impact on the character of place. But other factors that might also change the character of place that relate to economics could be migration, conflict, terrorism, but also factors such as natural disasters and climate change, which will have physical impacts on the nature of a place. For example, if we take climate change, the Maldives is very susceptible to sea level rise because most of the land are small islands which lie on or just above sea level. So as sea levels rise, we could see the disappearance of the Maldives, which would obviously impact the characteristics of their location. So factors like these affect the ways that people who live there and work there perceive the place that they live in. So external forces can also bring about change, and this is shown through some examples that I've got here. So we have government policies, which are external factors which might influence change within the place. Examples of these are regeneration schemes, subsidies, tax breaks, and also the development of enterprise zones, and these can have impacts such as attracting business to certain places and also stimulating a positive multiplier effect. Also, we have external factors such as the decisions made by multinational corporations. These have very significant effects. For example, if we take the example of Cadbury, in 2010, a big multinational corporation called Mondelez International closed the Cadbury factory near Bristol and moved production to Poland. So this is obviously going to have a big impact on the place in which the factory used to exist, because there would be job losses for employees, and also the factory was converted into housing. So the factors of the environment changed dramatically. And lastly, external factors include the impacts of international or global institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Health Organization. For example, in 2015, the World Bank was running 15 development projects in Haiti, and also the UN developed the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, and they've just established their Sustainable Development Goals for 2015. So if we take these examples, the development projects in Haiti started by the World Bank. These allowed post-earthquake reconstructions to take place after the Haiti earthquake, and this was rebuilding homes and communities. So obviously that would have a huge effect on the characteristics of the place following the earthquake. And in relation to the Millennium Development Goals made by the UN, these have had varying levels of success around the world despite being the same set of goals. So even factors like this can change the characteristics of locations as well. So now we're going to look at some examples of continuity and change within places. And places can be investigated at a range of scales, and I'm going to use 3 examples to get this across to you. And one significant way in which continuity and change can be measured in terms of places was that they've used in the past poverty maps, which were created by Charles Booth in 1866, so they're very old, and they've used these poverty maps as a base and then gone on to investigate the changing social and economic conditions of the residents who have lived in places over time. So it's measuring how the economics and social conditions of a particular place have changed over time, relating back to a base level of poverty. So the three examples we're going to look at, they've all experienced different levels of change in their communities on a progressively larger scale, starting with Bournville village in Birmingham, then Devonport in Plymouth, and then finally Medellin, which is a city in Colombia. So first of all, we're going to look at how Bournville village in Birmingham has changed over time. And Bournville is a very good example of a place that has been shaped almost entirely by the beliefs and ideals of one industrial family who was very famous, and this is the Cadbury family. And Bournville was built as a garden village in the late 19th century. And this was after the family had moved to the rural Bournbrook estate on the outskirts of Birmingham. And in order to build new premises for their expanding cocoa and chocolate business, they built the Bournville village essentially for their workers to live there. And the area provided an ample space for the construction of things like tree-lined roads, housing with front and back gardens to ensure spacious and sanitary living conditions for the workers in the Cadbury factory. Also, were no public houses, so the garden village was only for the workers of the Cadbury factory. And they also set up things like schools, hospitals, museums, public baths and recreation grounds for not only the workers but also the families of the workers as well. And they also laid out a tenth of the estate as parks, recreation grounds and open space, and this provided to be a key driver in the later development of the garden city movement that happened across the UK. So the Bournville village is a very good example of an original garden city. And we can see a drawn image of Bournville here in this advertisement, which shows a very happy and healthy and a prosperous place to live that's got lots of green spaces and good living conditions for the workers. And as a company, Cadbury's has now achieved significant global success. And in 2010, it became part of the multinational operation known as Mondelez International. So it globalized essentially. And in contrast, the place of Bournville has changed very little since Cadbury became a multinational company. So Bournville is now no longer exclusively inhabited by the employees of Cadbury factory, but the physical appearance of the garden city and the community feel as well of the place have largely remained intact despite the corporation changes that have occurred in 2010. Alongside this, in 2003, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation officially found Bournville the nicest place in Britain. And The Guardian also said that it's easy to see why. People do old school community things like talk to each other and grow vegetables, flowers blossom in the streets, and houses are, nice to look at, and the trees and bluebells are only a few footsteps away. So it seemed like it was a really kind of good place to live, a very happy and a very nice and clean environment for people to live in. And the city of Birmingham has grown well beyond the boundary of Bournville, but the garden suburb of Bournville still encapsulates the very positive ethos and the values of the Cadbury family that they wanted to instill into their village. And there are still large areas of green space that remain in the area, and planning and building is very tightly controlled so as to not try and alter the characteristics and the atmosphere of this place. And alongside this, the area has very little crime, and there is a long waiting list for its affordable homes because people are very keen to live in this area. The next case study we're going to look at is the town of Devonport in Plymouth. And Devonport is very much different to Bournville, which we just looked at. And Devonport has changed considerably over the last 50 years, largely as a result of external factors which have influenced the characteristics of the town. The town was originally established as a naval dockyard town because of its location on the sheltered harbour known as the Plymouth Sound, which we can see in this photograph here. So it was a good place to locate a naval base, especially around the time of the First World War and the Second World War as well. And at that point, it had become one of the fastest growing towns in the country, and it enjoyed a lot of prosperity. And as we can see here, the buildings were very nice and developed, very much a Georgian-inspired building. And this attracted people from higher socio-economic groups to come and live in Devonport. So, unfortunately, Devonport's fortunes fluctuated following the end of the Second World War, and in 1952 the Navy requisitioned Devonport town centre as a storage enclave, and they enclosed it within a 3-metre high wall, and this essentially damaged the community irreparably. The community was split in two, the residents were displaced and rehoused in flats and apartments which were very ill-suited to family living because they didn't have gardens and they didn't have multiple floors and they weren't very family-friendly. So people started moving out of the area. Alongside this, naval jobs continued to decline as well following the end of the World War II, and this was because of military cutbacks. And overall, the movement of people out of this area and the loss of naval jobs led to a lot of socio-economic problems in the 1980s and 1990s. However, between 2001 and 2011, Devonport benefited from an initiative called the New Deal for Communities, which provided 10 years of funding to improve some of the UK's worst and most deprived areas. So the scheme aimed to change place-related outcomes, and they addressed issues such as crime, community housing, people-related outcomes such as education, health and employment as well. And it had a really good effect, and the physical environment of Devonport has changed considerably since. And the dividing naval wall, which was built in 1952, was demolished, and historical landmarks incorporated into the redevelopment of the area were built as well. And the regeneration has also tried to attract a wider range of people back into the area, with options for private or shared ownership and the availability of social housing as well. So that is how Devonport has been redeveloped essentially, and how the characteristics of the town have changed following World War II and now into the 21st century. It's changing again. However, there are still pockets of deprivation within the town, but the New Deal programme and other redevelopment projects have significantly changed and improved the area, with many benefits to local residents. So the city of Medellin in Colombia was affectionately nicknamed the City of Eternal Spring, and it is the second largest city in Colombia. But for a long period of time, it was associated with drugs and violence, and it was also named the most dangerous city in the world. And this had a lot to do with the notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar, seen in this photograph here, who pretty much controlled the city, and he had enormous power in the city until his death in 1993. And at this time, when Pablo Escobar was in power, there were severe levels of unemployment, crime and poverty, and they were all widespread in Medellin, and in this in turn created a lot of social inequality. But today, Medellin is a very different city, and it has a population of 2.2 million, and it has become a model for urban regeneration and sustainable city planning through long-term investments in things like infrastructure and also in education as a means to reduce the amounts of social inequality in Medellin. Now, through this planning philosophy, the city's long divided social classes are now more able to integrate with each other in everyday economic and educational activities. And the city's poorest, many of whom reside in shanty towns and shanty houses in what's called the Abura Valley, which is along the outskirts of the city, they can now access the city's booming economic centre, shown in this photograph here, as a courtesy of a series of outdoor developments, such as the building of outdoor escalators, and also a gondola system, which is essentially these little bubbles that people sit in, which take them across the city. and they carry people up and down the valley. And they've also made additional innovations, including what's called a bus rapid transport system named Metro Plus. And this has dedicated bus lanes and an extensive above-ground tram system and a citywide ride-sharing program. So you can see they've really made developments into improving public transport within the city so as to encourage more movement of people and more integration between social classes, and not just restricting particular social classes to stay within one area, such as the poor people having to stay within the Abura Valley where all these shanty towns are located. So they've also made developments as well into emission-free transport, which has been promoted in improving the sustainability of the city. And this has been helped by what's called the Encicla initiative, which is a free bike sharing program that offers an integrated alternative to the city's public and mass transportation systems, such as the bus network and the roads. And other factors which have been improved in the city is the budgets that have gone into improving education, social programs, and also the public arts and culture budgets. And they've all been increased to be able to transform the lives of the most underprivileged residents in this city, those people that live in the shanty towns. However, all of this sounds really, really positive about, the redevelopment and the urban regeneration that's taking place on a very sustainable level. But there are still lots of problems in Medellin, and this is because social factors cannot be changed overnight. They take a long time to come into force. Since the regeneration has taken place, though, poverty rates have fallen, but the inequality still between the rich people and the poor people has increased, and cultural and geographic barriers continue to limit social integration, despite the efforts of the public transport system to try and integrate people better across the city. Also, crime rates and gang violence remain high, and this is just because it's historical. It was the most dangerous city in the world, and this also isn't going to change overnight, but it's through improving the atmosphere and improving the environment and the characteristics of the place that crime rates and gang violence might start to fall in the future. And the most kind of influential point here is that change takes time, and despite the current social conditions, there is still a great feeling of optimism within the city. So to finish off, we're now going to answer an exam style question, and this relates to two images. So the figures below show a painting from 1935 and a photograph from 2010 of high-level bridge across the River Tyne in Newcastle. So here is our painting from 1935 and our photograph from 2010. And what we're being asked to do is to evaluate the usefulness of the figures in showing the nature and extent of either economic change or demographical and cultural change in this area. So essentially what we're doing is we're comparing and contrasting the photograph and the painting in order to see how well they show the extent of either economic change or demographic and cultural change. So I'm deciding that I'm going to focus on economic change when answering this. Because this or here, it means you can choose one or the other. So I'm going to go with economic change. So we're going to focus on how industry and the built environment has changed between the painting and the photograph. But we're also going to assess as well how useful each of the methods of displaying information are good at displaying information as well. So we can see a lot has changed in this photograph. Obviously here we had a very big built environment, whereas this has largely disappeared on this bank of the river. We have industry being built around these areas. We have oil sheds being built over here. And we had these staiths here in 1935, which we can no longer see in the image here on this bank of the river. So the staiths have gone. So we might allude to how this might have happened as we assess the differences between the painting and the photograph. So to start my answer to the question, I've said through the images it is possible to evaluate economic effects effectively in several ways. So that's my overall statement. I've said it is possible to evaluate the economic factors. In the painting, industrial development and housing is also located along the river with more or less continuous buildings. Furthermore, staiths for shipping are constructed into the river. So here I'm just describing the painting. The bridge construction in the foreground suggests industrial and commercial development in the area, and another bridge is also visible in the background showing further development. And here I'm alluding to this bridge here, which is the high-level bridge, and also the development of this bridge in the background here. So I'm alluding to this saying that at this point in 1935 there was a lot of industrial development in the area. So now that I've laid out the facts of what I can see in the painting, I'm going to contrast and compare this to what I can see in the photograph from more present day. So I've started off by saying, however, in the photograph from 2010, industry by the river has changed, with the earlier buildings having been replaced by an oil storage facility and oil sheds. I've just assumed here that they're oil storage facilities, and I know the area quite well, but as long as you say kind of a storage facility and the sheds that you can see in the image, then it's all right if you don't specifically say that they're oil, but it's always good to make assumptions and kind of, have a good guess of what they might be. Also, the staiths have either been removed or damaged. The visual images therefore indicate significant economic change over the 75-year period. So this is essentially my conclusion over the painting and the photograph, and what I think, has happened over time. And I've said there has been significant economic change. However, that's not going to be the end to my answer. I'm now going to go on and comment at how effective the painting and the photograph were for telling me these facts. So essentially what I'm doing in this last paragraph is assessing their usefulness as sources. So I've said, furthermore, in terms of the usefulness of the sources, the photograph is potentially a more truthful representation of the area because the artist's painting is more subjective, which means that he could have, added his own interpretation to it, and he could have fabricated what was actually there. It's not a, real and legitimate picture, essentially. It doesn't represent reality, thus reducing the overall usefulness of using the painting as a means for evaluating change over time. Additionally, both sources have a limited perspective and are a snapshot in time, so they may not show the full extent of change in the area.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're looking for an amazing A-level geography resource, join me today in my series of engaging bite-sized video tutorials. See you soon, and together let's make A-level geography a walk in the park.